Hey everyone, welcome back. And in this video, let's just go ahead and take a look at how you can create more flexible components, which are called flexible compound components as well, using the same thing, right? Using the same sort of logic of sharing the state. So let me just go ahead and restore what we had really quick. So checkbox input and then label with a click me, something like that, right? And I'm also going to remove this custom logic because we probably would rather throw instead of, not really creating the the sort of fallback thing. So I'm going to just throw new error should be used inside checkbox. Now, with that being done, what I want to do is I want to do something which will allow you to do something like this, right? Because what's going to happen right now, you can see that we get a no custom element supported, which is perfectly fine. But even if you try to, support it, what's going to happen is that the element will not appear. Why? Because react.children.map can only run on a single level nested, right? You probably might be thinking that now, how do I inject the label with the appropriate values or with the appropriate thing? Even if you get rid of this whole thing and getting all the warnings and everything, you're going to see that you get an error that label should be called from the checkbox component, even after the fact that it has been called inside the checkbox component. The reason the set checked property is not reaching the label is because react.children.map is going to cover only 3 children. That is, the first one is going to be or not really 3, just the 2. The first one is going to be the input type of the checkbox, and the second one is going to be this div right here. React.children does not recursively go inside the children, right? So how do you fix that? Well, firstly, you might be thinking that maybe if there's a way to recursively, go inside that particular tree and do some sort of stuff. But yeah, no, let's not do that. Instead of going recursive way, what we can do is we can pull the state out, that is the shared state, inside a context, right? Context is supported by default, comes from React, pretty much an easy API to set up and allows you to have nested access. So how do you do that? Is you first of all go ahead and create a context, or maybe like create a provider or something. So you say create context, import it, probably, right? And then you can pass in any value which you want. Next is you go ahead and instead of returning all children, what you can do is you can say, or maybe like, checkbox interface, something like that. You can say checkbox interface dot provider and then wrap the whole children return value inside this, right? So what's happening here is that you are essentially just passing or just covering this all children into a provider, which is a context provider. Now, what you can do is you can pretty much get rid of this whole thing. Let me just tell you why. You can get rid of this whole thing and you can pass the value directly as the context value. So what's happening here is, and instead of all children, now you're going to be just using children. So what's happening here is that you are now passing or storing the value checked and set checked, which is the state, inside the context, and then your children can access that context directly. And the way they will access this is something like this. Instead of now receiving it from the props, you're going to be receiving it from the context provider. So you're going to have something like checked and set, or maybe like not really this, because we want to check if this called from outside the main component. So I'm going to say use context, and then I'm going to be providing this checkbox interface, right? So the moment we do that, we can check if the context is not present. Again, label should be called within the checkbox component. If it is, then I can just destructure checked and set checked. And I can just say props, not really props, but context. And we of course still need the children because that is obviously passed directly. And then we can just use set checked, right? Similarly, for checkbox input, we will not need the props anymore, but we will need the context, pretty much like this. And I can say if context is not present, we throw the error. Otherwise, I take out the checked and set checked from the context itself and then use it, right? So now if you go ahead and refresh this, you can see it pretty much works fine, even if it is embedded inside a div. Now you don't really have to worry about nesting at all because you know that, context provides access to all the children. Because we are using a hook, use context, we get the setter and getter of the state directly, right? So that's a pretty cool use of the context API in terms of creating your own components, which are compound components, and you want them to work in a following way. So yeah, I mean, that's a pretty neat approach. Let me know what you think about this approach, and you can use that. So if you try to, again, just to verify it one more time, if you try to use something like this out of the component itself, you're going to see should be used inside checkbox, because now our context is not defined. So the use context returns undefined because we were never able to find the provider, right, in the first place. That is why. So yeah, this works fine. Everything looks fine. That is all for this video. I'm going to see you in the next one.